How's it going, everybody? JT here on behalf of the daily general discussion on our Ethereum and the EV Mavericks DAO on Discord. Super delighted today. 132nd episode for this November 14, 2025. I have my newfound friend, David Kronovet, a.k.a. Chrono. I probably did that wrong. I should have said David Kronovet, a.k.a. Chrono, tuning in.
Actually,
yeah.
I got a mic check you. It's Daniel Kronovet, but we were very close.
Daniel Kronovet. What did I say? David?
Oh, that's like the next best thing, really. That's the next best thing.
Okay, I'm a little slow today. I haven't had enough mushroom coffee yet. I will wake up, I promise.
Okay.
I'm busy. I got family coming into town. I think you said you're with family out of town. So
Thanksgiving's coming up. Def Connect is coming up. A lot's going on.
A lot going on. And I've also got our technical interviewer sitting with us on Discord, LogrisTheBard. LogrisTheBard is how Daniel and I met, and we met literally over a document about an hour ago, and we've got some ideas. But there's some built-in hype about you coming on to the show, and you're apparently cartridge.gg is a pretty well-known like gamers platform. So we're gonna jump right into that. So let's go back a few years. A little bit of your origin story. It's not really about when did you first learn about Bitcoin. It's more when did you first dive in completely, and why was Ethereum the best chain of choice at the time?
Yeah, great question. I think pretty classic as far as it goes. I was at walking the dog, got struck by lightning, and ever since then I've just been really good at computers.
It's pretty standard story.
Not much more to say about that. I think so. The Ethereum thing, I'll kind of here's how it went down. As a kid, really into games, really into technology. Kind of that kind of kid. And then when I was in my 20s, kind of as a student, I got really into cooperatives, housing co-ops, kind of a, shared governance, shared decision-making, shared power. I was studying political economy. I was in leadership, running the co-op. And so I was really very immersed in those ideas at that time. And then a couple years later, I go to grad school for math and computer science, do some research on voting systems, and that was kind of my interest at that time. And then pretty quickly after graduating, I was kind of like, graduating around 2016, I'd been following Ethereum for a couple of years. I was like, oh, this is kind of neat. And the kind of early DAO sort of utopian vision of this new platform, new ways of sharing power, new ways of making decisions, I just kind of ate it up, like a lot of people did during that time. I was working in machine learning at a grad school. A couple of years of that, joined Colony, which was one of the earliest kind of OG DAO projects that Logri is familiar with. That's how we met. Spent 6 years there as one of their research engineers, helped rewrite their white paper, did a lot of their mechanism design, developed one of the earliest systems for public goods funding in Ethereum called Budget Box that we were really proud of. So yeah, spent 6 years doing DAO governance work. And then that project kind of wound down a little bit earlier this year. And so I ended up finding a new job, and I ended up at Cartridge in Web3 gaming. It wasn't something that I was specifically looking for. I was sort of saying, okay, well, let's see what else is out there. I've been at this place for 6 years. Let's see what else is going on. Was like interviewing at a couple like L2s as like a backend engineer, this and that. And through a friend got connected to Cartridge. Pretty good cultural fit. And yeah, I think sort of, I think going from governance to gaming was in many ways ended up being a kind of very natural evolution, as I'll maybe talk a little bit later. I think that some of the mechanism design questions that you do with digital governance are not so dissimilar from the kind of mechanism design questions you deal with when you're making on-chain games. They're not the same, but they're also not so different. And so going into gaming, in as much as my governance work was inspired by my childhood as a gamer, going into gaming, coming out of governance, there was a very, I think, elegant arc to the whole thing. And so that's kind of how I ended up at Cartridge. Been there for about half a year. It's pretty awesome. really great team. I could rave about them. I probably will.
Good.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet.
Hey,
We're going to be showing up big at Dev Connect. So if you're going to be there, look us up because we're going to be really showing up next week.
are you? What is your role then at Cartridge specifically?
So I lead developer relations.
Okay.
And so I kind of have one hand in the engineering team on the developer experience side, one hand sort of on the growth and ecosystem side, doing educational work, supporting new developers, outreach, advocacy, education, things like that.
So what is your products for Cartridge for our viewers?
Yeah, so Cartridge is a project that is very immersed in specifically the StarkNet ecosystem.
Okay.
So StarkNet is an Ethereum L2 that has done some really innovative work on zero knowledge proving, and I could tell you a little bit more about StarkNet. And StarkNet has made a big bet on-chain gaming, and specifically they made that bet on Cartridge. So Cartridge is very much StarkNet's like center of on-chain gaming, and we make a couple of different products. A couple of them are tooling. So we make a web wallet for gaming called Controller that is, I would say, a pretty impressive piece of equipment. I've used it quite a lot at this point.
I connected to that earlier today just in case. I got my lattice here, and like if we want to walk through something, I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, so we can go through Controller. As I said, it's a pretty nice piece of equipment. So Cartridge makes that. They make Slot, which is a managed sort of infrastructure service. So if you basically are trying to deploy a game, rather than fumbling with infrastructure, it's kind of like a one-click deploy. And so those are some of the services that Cartridge offers. Cartridge also is the lead developer of a framework called Dojo. Dojo is an open source framework for making games on StarkNet. So it's a Cairo framework plus, if you go to Dojo Engine go to the Dojo Engine link, you see right over there on the About side. Just kind of go a little bit to the right, down. Right in the About.
The right tab. It's the page is bifurcated. So on the right side of all the file lists is a section called About. Or you can just type in dojoengine.org.
Okay.
Yeah, right there, exactly.
You can tell I have very little experience with GitHub.
It's good. It's good. We're learning together. We're doing it together.
Thank you.
So this is so Dojo is an open source framework for making on-chain games on StarkNet. What it is it's a framework called Dojo, which basically gives you an ECS framework in Cairo. And so, for those who are unfamiliar, ECS stands for Entity Component System. It is I would say, a pretty modern approach to game development. If anyone is curious about the history, I am, so I'll nerd out about it for a sec. So for most of the 90s, game development followed sort of an object-oriented approach. Like every monster was an object, objects have state and behavior, so on and so forth. That worked until it didn't, as I think is true for most object-oriented programs. Eventually it just stopped really working. And so the team actually that made Thief, the Dark project. So if you remember that game, Thief, like one of the first stealth games, 98. I forget who made it. What studio? Let's look it up just to give them the credit that credit's due. So that was made by Looking Glass Studios and published by Eidos. So they developed a framework called ECS, which stands for Entity Component System, and that became kind of the new paradigm for game development really ever since. The way that it works,
it's a lot more event oriented, right?
Exactly.
Rather than having, I have to keep track of everything that I have to change and go down a list of objects, know who might be relevant to everything. It's kind of more of an event pub sub type model. So you say like, the gun fired, and then everyone that cares can now subscribe and react to that type of thing.
Exactly. And you can think of the state changes as being a little bit more sort of tabular, where, there's basically, imagine that every sort of all your game state is just a big table. Every component is kind of a table, and then every entry is a different entity. And so a lot of your updates is just querying and updating state kind of in a tabular way. And so rather than iterating over objects, you're really iterating over components, which means you can update the world much more flexibly and much more efficiently than you could before. That's the core idea. Turns out it works pretty well, and that's what most people do. And so Dojo is an ECS framework for Cairo. A couple things about Dojo I think are worth really calling out is it's really tightly coupled to its toolchain. So there's the actual framework for writing Cairo contracts, But there are also a couple of key pieces of infrastructure. If you go down to the toolchain section, you'll see them right there. There's Katana, there's Tori, and there's Sozo. So Katana is a sequencer. A sequencer is pretty much the same as a validator in Ethereum. It is the computer that takes transactions and executes them for you. Starknet has sequencers, and Katana is basically the developer sequencer that you use in development, but you can also use it for running what we call app chains, which are much faster sequencers specifically for your program. And there are a lot of I think more advanced questions that we can get into later about, how to deploy an on-chain game, what kind of infrastructure to use, how isolated from the main chain should it be versus tightly coupled or integrated. I don't want to get into that now, but Katana is a pretty nice piece of infrastructure that is part of the Dojo sort of package. There's also Tori, and I think it's really worth talking about Tori because of where it fits into game development. So, something to think about. So Tori is an indexer. And what that means is that, whenever you're making an on-chain transaction, a transaction will both change on-chain state, but it will very often emit events. And the idea of an event is it's not on-chain state, but it is something that can be read and subscribed by off-chain services to basically provide better UI. And so a lot of the UI that you see when you're interacting with, if you're on OpenSea or, any sort of DeFi protocol, a lot of the UI is powered by events because they're a lot cheaper than on-chain state and more flexible. And, when people have been trying to make on-chain games, something that they basically all run into is the need to create a custom indexer for their events. It's like you attack an enemy, you swing a sword, you cast a fireball, +5 damage, so on and so forth. Everyone ends up converging on a similar design, which is we need to emit events and then subscribe to them and then use them to render the client. And so the Dojo and cartridge team said, let's just do this once for everyone, make a really awesome indexer, and then people can just spin that up. And the last thing I'll say about how it all fits together is Dojo, when you're using it to make contracts, part of what it does as a framework is it adds a lot of events automatically. So when you are writing your game code in Dojo, at compile time, there's a lot of meta programming to add lots and lots of useful events. And so you can really just compile a Cairo program or a Dojo program, point Katana at the deployed contract address, we call it the world address, and then you have basically all of your indexing out of the box. And so if you're like a small game developer, you basically get for free an entire, batteries included game stack that, even 3 years ago, you'd have needed a team to build. And so that's like the kind of the big Dojo idea. And so we at Cartridge say, well, use controller to log in, use Dojo to make your game, use our infrastructure to deploy your game. And so we're basically saying we have an entire ecosystem for you, use it. And people do, and I think people have tended to be very happy with that choice.
What is go ahead, Logri.
A couple things. So, Cairo is that was in 2019 or so, that. It's getting, it's been out a good long time at this point. And when it first came out, it was remarkably different than just the writing code for the EVM. So it wasn't like writing Solidity code. It was more functional in its nature. It was a lot more complicated to write. And I know that was off-putting to some people. Has the developer UX on this, has the tooling caught up to a point where you have your VS Code extensions and all the syntax understood, and you can basically write your unit tests, and is all of this basically caught up in the same way that there's massive investments in Solidity, right? And Cairo is just a smaller ecosystem. So what is the tooling gap between larger programming languages, your .NET environments or whatever, and what you'd see with Cairo?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I would say the answer is sort of what you would expect, which is it is both a more complicated language stack and a smaller community, and so it is to an extent lagging behind Solidity. It is still getting much better. Cairo 2 came out, maybe a year or two ago, and that was a big step forward. The team is working pretty hard to continue to improve the network. There was a big migration to 0.14 in September, which decentralized the sequencers and brought a more advanced fee market similar to the Ethereum fee market. So there's really a lot of work happening. There's a new prover. So one of the big things about Starknet and Cairo is that it is a a provable language. That's their big thing, and kind of the core idea behind Starknet compared to most other Ethereum chains is that with an Ethereum chain, all the validators have to rerun all the transactions. That's the core idea. The only way that you can validate a block is by rerunning all the transactions yourself. With Starknet, because Cairo is what we call a provable language, meaning that if you execute a Cairo program, you can then take the trace of execution, prove it, and then only validate that proof down the road. That's kind of like the big idea behind Starknet and Cairo and why Cairo is a different language. One thing, a little bit more of an advanced topic that I think some of you will appreciate. So Cairo is actually fundamentally very unique as a language. Most programming languages are based on kind of a Boolean logic of and, or gates, bit operations, so on and so forth. Cairo is not. Cairo is actually based on the idea of an arithmetic circuit. The core primitive is not like a U256. It's actually a felt 252, which is not 256 bits, but it is a point in a prime field. And so all those sort of computations are actually just an abstraction over like a whole arithmetic sort of foundation, which is then sort of turned into a simulation of just regular programming.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a paradigm shift and would be off-putting to a bunch of developers, right?
It's a pretty massive paradigm shift, and I think actually to their credit, Logri, the fact that they've made it as familiar as they have, I think really is kind of incredible. I think the team has done a pretty good job of making it as accessible as possible, given how alien
fundamentally different it is. Yeah, it's like it's as different as VHDL or like embedded circuits are to programming for a CPU, right?
Yeah, it's really wild. And so I think to their credit, they've done a really good job. I think they're the testing infrastructure is improved. I think there was a big integration with Foundry recently, so it is moving forward. I think to your point, it's kind of what you would expect if you have both a more complicated stack with a smaller ecosystem. It's going to move at about the pace that you would think, which is forward. I think definitely if you're going to be building on Starknet, you're going to take on. It's kind of like where Ethereum was in 2018, which is when I entered the ecosystem, probably about the same. And I think ultimately, you have to ask yourself, like, do I think that the significant performance benefits I get are worth this extra overhead? Many people think that way. Some people are waiting in the wings. I think Starknet is pretty cool. I think some of the things they've done are incredible. But yeah, it's a little bit less. I would say it's Ethereum in 2018. That's basically how it is.
We've had a couple breakout hits on Starknet. I remember Axie Infinity. I believe that was in Starknet, right?
I actually don't know if it was. I know. I think Effluence is a Starknet game, but I don't know if I think Axie might have been on a different chain.
Influence is definitely running on Starknet. Yeah.
Is that Inside
Influence
the Simulations project?
Yeah, it was. I think he's left that project at this point due to lack of funding. So it's down to Darkos at the moment as the only dev, and they're kind of dying from a lack of onboarding funnel. Like they're unable to get gamers to join and get through the layers of all the wallet setup and everything, which is kind of what Cartridge is trying to make easy, right?
I'm telling you, gang, like the controller is pretty sweet. Like I know I do work there, so I do have to say that, but even if I didn't work there, I would still say it because it's a pretty nice piece of equipment. It's like easy to use. It works really well. It's fun. Like I think the vision of the cartridge team was for this sort of like single entry point, easy to integrate, kind of portable wallet that becomes your identity around a whole gaming ecosystem. Has been executed, I think, very very well, and they keep improving it.
What are some other games that you think are mature enough to be worth checking out, as in like pass a certain fun bar, not just it is a Web3 game or even has enough users, but is actually a good game before it is a Web3 game?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think that actually gets to maybe an even broader question that we could spend some time on, which is what is the form factor that we're converging on for on-chain games? I don't want to say is it just, that's dismissive and that's not right. Is it going to be, basically a Web 2 game with the blockchain hidden? Is there like an on-chain native type of like game paradigm that we're sort of iterating towards? Is it going to be a mix of both? There's the guy Nick Metzler in our ecosystem who's really interesting. I think actually would be a great guest for this show. He wrote an essay last year called A Fork in the Road, where he basically explored the question of whether, basically he concluded that it's going to end up being two distinct audiences with very little middle ground. Either you're going to be making like risk to earn, real money, like more, decision making under uncertainty games for on-chain natives.
Your poker style things, yeah.
Exactly.
P to
Or you're
P
gonna,
versus P.
exactly. Or you're going to be making like, Web 2.5 type experiences. Whether that's true or not remains to be seen. But I do think that something that I've been enjoying watching is seeing the ecosystem kind of like explore a very new base. I mean, I think one thing I'll say about the sort of ecosystem that we're in is a lot of these people are very excited about this new sort of like green field, and everyone's trying to figure out what the form factor is. So actually, one example I would actually point you to. So the game I think that makes the most sense to talk about now is Loot Survivor 2. So if you actually want to go back to the arcade, you go to Loot Survivor. This game came out just about 2 months ago, and I think is a really good example of what a Web3 native game is, and specifically all the things that they did to make it a pretty cohesive experience. I think a couple things I'll say about it. So the game itself is a roguelike dungeon crawler, which really leverages the VRF. And so, for those unfamiliar, VRF is a verifiable random function, and it's really important to be able to basically call a random number on chain. And for those of you who are like less familiar, maybe Logo, you can shine some light on this. But developing pure randomness on chain has been like a pretty big research question for many years. A couple of years ago, people would just like use the timestamp, but then miners could basically game that, and having a source of randomness that was trustable and not gameable, that didn't use an oracle or like
it has
they
to
used
be
use
provable
oracles.
after the fact that it was random. It can't be anticipatable. I know that the way that we select committees for the Ethereum beacon chain has to be random. Otherwise, you'd be able to somehow collude and figure out when the set of slots that you have are going to have the majority, and so you don't need to have everyone corrupted. You just need to have your committee corrupted, right? And so being able to scheme to exactly when that would happen would be a very bad thing. So yeah, I mean, just generating random numbers in computers in total is difficult. But I remember this was something that Funfair was like the one thing that they really did. They had a whole like state channel thing, which didn't work out. They tried to, but they were basically making on-chain gambling. And the single thing you need to run a slot machine is a random number generator, right? Yeah, like everything on top of that is basically skin, right? It's just art assets and flashing lights and everything. There's some monetary transfers, but the single thing you have to get right to run a casino is a random number generator. So
Exactly.
Funfair.
So they were well known for their random number generator. One thing I'll say also is, Cartridge made one too that was like, I don't want to say better, but like equivalently performant. And maybe one might say better, but and that was sort of something that almost didn't get any notice at all. It's like we actually made a random number generator also that was really cool that we use in all of our games. So yeah, so that's another thing that Cartridge brings to the table is we have a VRF. And again, like the Cartridge team as an engineering org is extremely competent, and they really are doing great work. So they were able to kind of pull that out of the air. They're like, yeah, we kind of need this. Let's like invent it really quickly and make that available to everyone. So they did that. Anyway, so Loot Survivor 2. So a couple of things they did really well. So the game itself is a roguelike dungeon crawler. What that means for those unfamiliar is, roguelike, that is a genre of game where every time you play the game, it's a little bit random and different every time. When you die, you start over. And so compare that to a Zelda where you play one long game and you can just keep dying and restarting. With a roguelike game, the game it's always being varied. And then when you die, you start over. So it's like a kind of different game style. Has proven to be very popular. I think one of the most popular genres today, for many reasons, which I'm not going to get into in this moment, but it's like an important game genre.
Yeah, I build up on that a little bit to say, so you have games where you get stronger and stronger and stronger over time. You build up your experience level, whatever. And then you get to the end of it and you go through the content. You're at the end of the theme park, and then what? And it kind of drops off. Roguelikes have these, they have more replayability. So if you look at the histogram of playtime on it, you get the people that are at like the 1,000, 10,000 hour mark on these games because of the variants. Basically, it's a giant puzzle generator, right? at its core. It's giving you variations on the theme, so small differences in the initial state create wildly different problems and outcomes.
Exactly. And I think that, I think one thing I could even go as far as to say is that roguelikes make a lot of sense for on-chain games, because really the core skill that you're mastering when you play a roguelike is, how do I really get better at navigating the uncertainty that this game has to offer? I think anyone who's played a roguelike, after 20 or 30 or 50 runs, every time you die, you will often die slightly differently. You'll think, oh, that time I was too aggressive, I should be more cautious. And the next time you think, oh, I was too cautious, I should be more aggressive. Or in this time I was unbalanced in this way. And so every time you play, you kind of notice the way in which you lost. And so you're constantly getting a little bit better at navigating that game's like sort of unfolding uncertainty. And ultimately, taking advantage when you can, being cautious when you can. And that's really kind of the skill. And I think, the last thing I'll say about roguelikes is I think they're so popular because they offer very high levels of replayability, but also their development budgets tend to be smaller. And so given that the gaming ecosystem as a whole is really struggling with exploding development costs, the idea of a genre that is just cheaper to develop, but still really compelling, I think has attracted a lot of people, especially smaller indie and like single and AA developers. So I think that's one angle. Anything else you want to say about roguelikes, or should I move on to the next topic?
Well, should I log in and see what it does? I mean, or do you want to move on? It's up to, let's just try it. So I'll just put in, and I suck at games. I peaked at like Super Metroid on the Super Nintendo system once upon a time.
You're doing great.
But I'll tell you what, I will say that when I came to the site earlier and like signed in, it was just as easy as any other website, as far as like, you could just connect your wallet and away you go. I'm going to sign this transaction.
Yeah, I think the idea of the controller as a web wallet versus
smooth.
an injected wallet.
Yeah, I didn't even notice. Like, I just connected my normal .eth address, and it's frictionless. I'll say that.
Definitely. Maybe do practice for free. So one thing also I'll say about Loot Survivor is that they're really innovating around the business model. And so this is the second thing. So the core, roguelike dungeon crawler, a series of encounters, you fight a monster, you get items, you buy items in the store. That's really it. You're constantly getting stronger and fighting stronger dangers. And this continues until you ultimately are not strong enough for a strong danger. And like the way that the game is actually implemented, I think is quite elegant. The actual game revolves around like kind of a rock, paper, scissors, which is very similar to what was that other game, Gigaverse, that came out? Rock, paper, scissors makes a lot of sense as, the term I'll use is like as a ludic element, which is like a basic sort of gameplay component for reasons that, has made rock, paper, scissors a popular game in actual history. So there's that. Yeah, there's certain elegant randomness. For example, one thing that they did that was kind of cool was that the monsters that you fight, their possible level is basically just 3 times your level. So when you're level 1, you could fight a monster between level 1 and 3. When you're level 10, it goes from 0 and 30. And so the stronger you get, the higher the strongest possible opponent you could fight gets. And so the game is always increasing in difficulty. And that's part of the roguelike design, that the longer you play, you can't really beat the game. You just survive as long as possible, and eventually you die and start over. And that's kind of the game design. I could talk more about the game, but I think that's enough for now. The other thing that they did that I thought was very cool from an on-chain game perspective was they really thought quite deeply about the economics. And what I mean by that is I think that on-chain gaming, at least the people that I am in contact with, I think are really reacting to the kind of play to earn moment a couple of years ago that I would say everyone would say now was kind of not a success. And I think the reasons why are sort of in retrospect pretty obvious, which is that you really can't pay your customers to use your product. Doesn't make any sense. So there's that. And I think people thinking a lot more about, how do you create a secure economics for your game to avoid specifically attracting extractive and mercenary kind of behaviors, which is what happens, I think, a lot of the time for on-chain games that try to offer real-world value. This is a big problem to solve. And the way that Loot Survivor did it, and I think what they did, I think, could really serve as a model for other games, which is why I wanted to talk about it, was they basically recognized that, when you have an on-chain game, you have to assume that people are going to bot it. They're going to automate the gameplay, that if there's any value, they're going to extract it.
Yeah.
At the same time, one of the cool things about on-chain gaming is that value can be contained in the game. And so you're kind of, there's sort of this like, you're caught, there's like this maybe a Gordian knot or like rock in a hard place. I'm not sure what metaphor I'm looking for here. Maybe one of you can tell me. But you both want to offer real world value, but you have to think very deeply about how to secure it from mercenaries, and in a way that doesn't cause the game to collapse in terms of its fun. And what Loot Survivor 2, what the team at Provable Games did, which I thought was very cool, was they said, okay, here's what we're going to do. You're going to pay to play the game. Kind of like insert coin. And I think there's another argument to be made here about the history of game monetization, which I think I might even spend more time on in a few minutes. But the idea of, the insert coin arcade model of the 80s turning into the, long form pay for a cartridge or something that you enjoy at home. So you pay $20, $50 for Zelda, you take it home, you don't pay at that point, you just enjoy it long form at home, to a brief moment of down, like there was like the service games, MMOs, but then ultimately I think gaming then ended up sort of in a freemium model because of mobile games, and that became the new kind of paradigm, which I think many people now think was like probably bad, and I think we'll probably look back on that as being not our best moment. Just because it really led to a lot of extractive and predatory mechanics being the only ones that were viable. And I think many people are unhappy about that. So
I think it's an industry that is struggling to expand to a new user base, right? Like, how do you get more users? It's hard to get penetration deep into like Africa or something, right? We have seen deep penetration like China, but outside of that, within the US, how do you get more users and expand the market? They went to mobile gaming. When you're on mobile gaming, and it's a worse user interface, and so they made these things that are just these highly addictive kind of psychological tricks to loot box or sell every little boost, make levels a little too hard than you can beat without paying for it, right? And as you said, to maximize extraction, and in a highly competitive environment where basically the price of games hasn't gone up in like ever, right?
Yeah. Actually, if you look at, so Matthew Ball is a VC who writes a lot about the game industry. I'd really recommend, every year he puts out like a 200 slide deck about the game industry. I would recommend to anyone interested in this topic, and he talks a lot about this, that compared to most other media, like customer expectations around the price of a game are extremely sticky. And so if you look at inflation adjusted terms, the price of a game has actually just gone down over the last 30 years, like a $30
nonstop. Yeah. I mean, I remember like a SNES game when I was young would be $50, right?
Yeah.
So
they stayed the same price for 40 years.
Exactly.
I know. And so that's like $150 or $200 in today's dollars. And yet, like, look at how much more effort has to go into these games.
Exactly. What hasn't really gone down is the price of produced games, because what hasn't gone down? User expectations. And so the problem that you have is that, budgets have gone up by a factor of, 10 or 50x, but prices have actually in, real terms gone down by probably 50%, if not more. And so, the gaming industry is in a bind. And I think people's shift towards freemium mobile was, I don't want to be normative. It just was what it was. But I do think that there's interest in my ecosystem at trying to find the next thing and to push past that, which I personally think is neat, and I'm amped about. So anyway, with that out of the way, going back to Loot Survivor. So what they did was they said, okay, well, ultimately the expected value of playing this game should be 0. And I think it's important to kind of unpack that. What they're saying is that you're going to pay to play the game. So we're kind of returning to an insert coin model of playing the game. But, and this is what I think is quite cool, is there are, there are now collectibles in the game, right? So you're paying to play the game, but you're also getting a chance to collect a valuable sort of item. And the idea in this case is, so you're fighting these monsters, you're fighting these beasts. And the beasts themselves are actually collectible items. And so when you defeat a beast, not every beast, but a very high-powered one, you actually collect it. And so then you can basically collect, similar to Pokemon cards, a portfolio, maybe that's not the right word, army, maybe the better word. You can collect, a menagerie of beasts that you have basically now, these are your collectibles. And those are valuable. And so the idea there is you basically have Loot Survivor bookended by 2 markets. You have a market for the actual price of the game, and the price of the game is not fixed. So the price of the game itself floats, and so the higher demand there is, the price goes up. The lower demand, the price goes down. There was a time, even like a month ago, where they were offering like kind of a limited time promotion around there's like an arcade token they were giving out at like a 4x rate, and for a few, maybe 2 weeks, the game was $5 a pop. And so yeah, for a while the game was people were paying $5 to play the game that you just saw JT play. And then that price has come down a bit. I think $1 is where the team wants it to be at stably. But the point is that the price floats, and the price of the beasts also floats, because as demand for beasts goes up and down based on secondary markets, those prices will increase or decrease. And the kind of the economic design here, the engineering here, is that you ultimately want the price of the game run and the price of the beasts to be relatively the same. I mean, the price of the beast relative to your odds of getting it being the same as the price of a dungeon run, so that the expected value, what do I pay to play the game, what do I get out of the game, should be pretty much equal, because then there's nothing to extract, right? At that point, if you're just running a bot to play the game, you're going to be spending as much to play the game as you're going to get out of it in beasts, which means, and I think this is really the cool part, that all of the surplus value is experiential, right? So the surplus value that I get from playing Loot Survivor is purely the pleasure I get from playing the game, because the economics of it net out to be zero. But the economics are still there. So they actually created a real value game and a monetization model that I think was pretty progressive, while also avoiding kind of trivial manipulation and extraction, while also finding a way to really give surplus entertainment value to the player. And
Well,
so
if there's no
I think
value for bots there, then all there is humans playing it, and you've inadvertently created another silver resistance signal. Congratulations.
yeah. So I think to their credit, they really thought quite deeply, and I think the team itself, it's three people. They're fun. I mean, I've gotten to know them pretty well. They're interesting characters. They're really I don't say they're nerds, because that's not nice. What I mean is that they really care about a lot of these details. Or I think at one point they just delayed the game for 6 months because they realized there was like they hadn't thought through an economic question that they wanted to really get right. So I think the care that they've into all of these details really goes so far beyond what someone who wasn't motivated by like the art and craft would ever do. And I think really to their credit, they've put so much care into the beasts as a collection. I think even as like an NFT project, the beasts are really, really unique. I actually did an interview with Loot Hero, who is one of the team members there, about the beast NFT, which is really cool. I think, let me see, I'll actually toss you a link, because it's really cool to look at them.
Sure.
The NFTs themselves are dynamically updated.
Oh, cool.
Let me pull it up for you. Yeah, so the NFTs themselves is fully on-chain art, which is pretty awesome. There's some things about the
Daniel,
beast that
you
I
can
wanna
put
tell
it
you
in
about.
the Doots podcast chat, is the channel right above the public
Yeah,
stage.
I'll pop it
If
in
you put it
right
in there,
now.
it'll show up on the screen here too.
Yeah, yeah. I just popped it in the chat. So for example, a couple things about the beasts is that they will show you. So when you collect a beast in the dungeon, the beast is still there. So like if you collect the Blood Moon Jaguar, it remains in the dungeon so other people can fight it, but they can never collect it. So the first time a beast is defeated, you collect it. It remains in the dungeon. But every time someone fights the Blood Moon Jaguar, um, it'll actually be reflected in the stat. And so if you collect a beast that will then go on to defeat, dozens of adventurers in the future, your actual collectible token will reflect that game sort of experience. So really your tokens are dynamically updating based on what's happening in the game world. And I think that is sort of like a really step forward for on-chain collectibles, in that they're really no longer just like a static object, but they're really quite a dynamic part of a world. And I think, the Provable team was very inspired by Loot, the NFT project from I think 22, which many of you might be familiar with. That was sort of like the spiritual origin of a lot of this. But yeah, they've done really, really cool work. And I think the way that they've thought about on-chain gaming, the economics of on-chain gaming, really has been very inspiring, I think, to many, many in the ecosystem. So I think that's the example that I would want to go over for this podcast.
The Beast Marketplace. I do like the sign-in as just a username,
I mean, I'm telling you, man,
It's
the
pretty
controller
easy.
is pretty sweet. Like, I keep saying that, but like, it's really true. It's like a pretty nice thing.
I just type in the username that I commonly use and hit connect, and then I sign it on my wallet. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to the early Starknet forum posts from like 3 or 4 years ago when Cartridge was starting, the whole idea was we could make a web wallet that used passkeys. They were like, we could just basically they implemented a passkey verifier as a Cairo contract, and that was it. If you're not familiar, passkey is like a new kind of login technology. You put your, finger on the thing. I'm not going to get into how it works, but it's, a step forward for authentication on the internet. And they said we could just implement this as a smart contract and then make a wallet out of it. And that was basically the origin of the whole company. It's actually true.
Wow. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool stuff. So that I think that's an example of a game that I think has done a really good job at being an on-chain game. And I think everyone, in the ecosystem has been very inspired by what these folks have done.
What is the currency I'm looking at here?
Yeah, so those are lords. So lords is so realms is basically a collective of game studios in our ecosystem.
Okay.
A couple of different teams are all sort of affiliated with realms. And lords is sort of their token. So it's their governance token. I think what they do is they try to have a lot of things paid in lords. So basically it's like their internal currency. And people buy lords to participate. Like you can buy dungeon runs in lords. You can buy items in lords. You can stake lords. It's the governance voting token, and so it's basically their token of their ecosystem. And the idea is that the more that people in the ecosystem make cool games and they drive demand for lords, the value of the lords token goes up. So that's, I think, pretty standard crypto sort of stuff.
Yeah, very cool. Let's see, we got about 10, 15 minutes left. I want to be respectful of your time as well.
Yeah, there's one more game I could talk about,
Sure.
Or we could talk about something else.
No. Go ahead.
So another game I think is worth talking about is Eternum. I think if you go to the it should be, is it there?
Loot Survivor, blah, blah.
No, let me see if I can find it for you. So Eternum is
Dark
very
Shuffle.
impressive. So
Dark Shuffle's what
Dark
I do in
Shuffle's
the middle
cool.
of the night when I want a snack.
That's funny.
I
let me see where it is. So Eternum is a 4X game, so very, very different. It's like 3D graphics in the browser. 4X is the kind of civilization style. You explore, you fight, you gather resources, you build towns, you make armies.
Wow.
But it's a multiplayer 4X game that's all on Starknet. Very, very impressive game. And I think the folks that are making that are also, it's a slightly larger team. Very, very ambitious, very competent people. So let me see if I can pull up something for you there. So that they're starting a format called Blitz, which is basically 2-hour kind of runs. I don't think there's let me see what I can do for you here. Let's see what I can do. Yeah, so you kind of have to right now join a session. You can't just play. But it's like a very, let me see if I can pull up a gameplay video. Starknet gameplay video. So just as you can put it on so folks can see what it looks like.
Sure.
11 months ago, Eternum. Gosh, unfortunately, I don't want to spend so much time trying to find a gameplay video. Because we're on. Anyway, so Eternum's very cool. Maybe in the show notes I can send some links. I don't have so much right now about it, but it's another very impressive game. Much more ambitious in terms of kind of real-time performance. Loot Survivor is a single player. You can really see the blockchain interaction. Every time there's an encounter, it's a new transaction. So, explore is a transaction, random number, encounter, right? It's very clear what's happening. Whereas Eternum, much more ambitious in terms of many people interacting, really more hiding the blockchain, creating more of a real-time experience. Very deep mechanics. Really, really a lot going on. So yeah, I think that's another example. There's more games. I would say we've got probably, 2 studios actively building in our ecosystem. Really talented people. We're launching things. Native mobile apps are coming. So really a lot going on. It's pretty cool.
So, what was the game studio a few years ago? Was it Ubisoft that tried to do a tokenized thing and it kind of blew up gamers' confidence and faith of I don't know. I think there was a bunch of gamers pissed off that GPU prices were so high, which was probably the real pushback more than anything. But are we seeing a softening of some of these larger studios looking at different avenues of revenue moving into the Web3 space? Or is it just that the Web3 gaming community is just going to be this entity that develops and blossoms on its own, which is kind of what I think is happening?
Yeah, I mean, it's really the $1 million question. It's the million Bitcoin
Could be
question.
billions.
I mean, look, it's a big question. I would say that it's not clear. I think, as I said earlier, there are some people who think that it's going to end up being two very different game communities that are not going to overlap. Some people disagree. Yeah, I think that right now there is a very low level of trust among conventional gamers for blockchain games.
Hmm.
I think that they, for better or worse, see it as just mostly scams. Um, and I can't blame them. If you were to look at, what has made the headlines and you were not in the weeds, like with the builders the way that I am, that's what I would think.
Yeah.
Like I'm around like people who are passionate about the potential of technology and care a lot about making cool things. Most people, if you look at the headlines, it's like, hype bubble burst, scam, this and that, right? So
Yep.
I don't blame anyone. Um, I do think that there are real issues with the games industry that blockchain games legitimately can solve. I think
Yeah.
even a month ago there was a big scandal in the Counter-Strike community. I don't know if you saw, where there was like the whole economy had a bit of a collapse, where there was some kind of rare knife collectible that was like, I think they were selling for $1,000 a pop because they were hard to get. It was like a
Mm.
valuable skin among Counter-Strike players. This is a big scandal, like maybe a month ago, and the team released a patch which basically meant that anyone could like mint could like craft a knife pretty
Oh
easily.
no.
And I think the price dropped 90% in like 24 hours.
Oh
I
my
think I think it was
God.
$2 billion were wiped off of the counter skin knife economy, and
Jesus.
this was a real thing. I mean, this is like real. This is real pretend value that was lost.
There's your use case right
I don't
there.
I don't see that you couldn't have a similar thing happen where your loot survivor team couldn't patch the rules of the game and make something more common, right?
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean,
there's nothing
yes, but I do
stopping the
think.
influence ETH team, for example, from like increasing the prevalence of nitrogen that you mine or something, right, in order to lower the market value of that, or add a new type of gas that makes travel cheaper, that changes the fundamentals of the economy.
Yeah, that's a great point. I would say two things to that. One, I think that is ultimately a product choice. Like one could make an on-chain game in which those things weren't configurable and say, look, like we're actually going to specifically not allow ourselves to make these changes, which you see very often on Web3 projects. They say we can't change this, and that is a product choice with pros and cons. And I think if one could do that, I think it would be easy to verify that. So I think one could make games, and you could say maybe we'll see maybe games that do that end up gaining users because of the higher trust level, and users say, well, we'd rather have a game that is you can't maybe patch in exchange for trust. Unclear, but one could do it, and it would be easy to verify if they did. That's the one thing. The second thing is, I think you could, going back to kind of the DAO thing we touched on at the beginning, really shift a lot of these decisions to the player base. So instead of a team, releasing patches, some of these economic management decisions could be player governed, which would again shift some of that onus away from the developer team onto the players who are the most affected. So I think those are two ways that the problem, at least the solution space, can become a little bit larger. That's what I'd say about that.
Yeah, the other thing I'd note is that there's deplatforming that occurs.
Yeah.
So you can get into an ecosystem like Steam, and then find that your account is gone, and there goes access to all your games, all your items, everything. At least if you're on chain, maybe they can prevent you from joining a game which they maintain the servers, right? But you'd still have access to the items that they were on chain, unless there's some type of freeze function added, like specifically, like you have with Circle's USDC, for example, right? So you could at least say like, well, your account is gone. I mean, maybe the characters aren't playable in the official servers anymore. But you could go to a non-official server with the same character, or you could take the NFTs or any items that you have that are on chain, and those still have market value, so you could redeem something out of them, right? The deplatforming is an issue that people don't care about until it happens to them.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a movement in the UK called Stop Killing Games, which is really trying to build momentum around advocacy on this issue, which we're sort of kind of like affiliated with and kind of vaguely supporting. Um, I shouldn't say vaguely, we are supporting, but it's not, it's like something that we're sort of talking about internally. But yeah, it's a real thing. And I think that, you know, games are important to people, and there's a lot of value, emotional and financial, wrapped up in games. And the fact that right now for conventional gamers, there's like so little recourse is kind of a problem. I think people will continue to acknowledge it, and I think that on-chain games are a very real and legitimate way to handle that. So I think that's all super valid, and I think that's a super valid reason for games to adopt more on-chain mechanics. I think that one thing that's a little bit more of a hard problem is like, what are the on-chain native game experiences that are going to be compelling? And I think that's kind of where games like Loot Survivor really shine, is they say, okay, you know, this is a new medium, it has new affordances and different constraints, and rather than try to recreate Web 2 games on chain, like what is the new experience that is going to be exciting? I think that's, I don't want to, the holy grail is
Yeah, and as
dramatic.
you said, there's Web 3 games that are trying to do that, and then there's Web basically 2.5. So go and play your Diablo game as usual, and then when you go to quit the world, any new items that are in your inventory, whatever your changed character and stash state is, gets written back to the chain as an attestation. Now it's your items, and you can trade them and stuff, right? And
Exactly.
it follows that form of just like, well, the only thing that's going to be on chain is kind of the end result of what's durable between sessions, games, whatever progress.
Exactly. I think that among my ecosystem, that's seen as like a little milquetoast. But again, like I don't know what the answer is. Yeah, I think
That's
yeah,
basically what Frontier is doing there, right? And that's
I believe so. I would need to double check, but yeah, yes. And I think that's an important step. I think most people that I talk to don't think that that is the like the maturation of the potential of the platform, but I think it's an important step, and I think a very natural first step. But yeah, I think yeah, it's really, I think that's the interesting question. I think that where we're at, or at least where I'm at in my conversations, is trying to understand kind of from first principles, like what could the solutions be? There's real value, that's one. There's also kind of a composability, like you can kind of permissionlessly compose games based on other games. And that was the idea of the Loot NFT project, was that you could basically have one game produce collectibles that other games can then use as inputs into their games. And so every game becomes part of a universe of experiences, almost kind of like that Ready Player One multiverse, where like now game experiences are kind of fractally becoming richer and richer as more games interoperate with other games. And it might be that that ends up being the really cool experience, that you enter into a chain and you're really playing in this kind of multiverse of experiences with like really interesting second order effects. That's something that we're sort of like, is that going to be the thing? Like, could be. I think the idea that ultimately clients are now pretty permissionlessly modifiable is a big thing. Like there's modding communities, but I think game studios have different relationships to their modding communities, and I think, as we've seen, many breakthrough games began as mods. So the fact that anyone can make a client, and we do see people making custom clients for our games, that's like another vector of innovation. So I think that these are all kind of directions, right? There's the ownership of assets as a direction. There's the composability as a direction. There's the modding, as a first class citizen as a direction. Maybe like rich economies of player governance is a direction. I think none of these have really gelled into like, this is the like prototype of the on-chain game that's going to be it. But I think we're sort of like discerning what the fundamental vectors are along which innovation could occur. And we're just kind of following those. It's kind of my read. Again, this is my opinion. There's people who've been doing this for longer who are smarter than me, who have different opinions. But yeah, I think that's kind of, I don't think there's like an opinion totally different that I haven't heard at all. I feel like I probably would have heard it if it was such a big deal, but also that might not be true.
Okay. So zooming out, if I wanted to create a game, you guys are providing the tools. I create the game. Is that directionally correct? And then it can become part of the platform. How does a game become platformed on the marketplace here? Like what allows it to show up on the sidebar? Is that a DAO governance vote, or how does that work out for people who might be interested in making a game and getting it listed?
Totally. So so you can make a game using, as I said, Dojo and Cartridge. We had a game jam 2 weeks ago. We had 30 submissions, so it's getting really easy to build with our tools. People love building with them. I like building with them. It's like a pretty nice experience. Yeah, so it's pretty easy to build the tools now if you just need the idea. Yeah, so anyone can submit a game to the arcade. I think I'm not 100% sure. I think it's an internal to the team process of whitelisting games.
Gotcha.
So I think I think there's a repo internally where we basically keep track of which games we want to show up on the arcade, because the arcade is a product that we manage.
Okay.
And so there's some internal governance around what we surface, kind of quality control. Is this game legitimate? Is there a quality bar?
Is somebody trying to sneak in like porn or whatever?
Yeah, I think we've had pretty good luck around that. We haven't had any real bad actors in our ecosystem. It's still a lot of, I would say, like real like enthusiasts, kind of like the 70s homebrew. Everyone's just amped about on-chain gaming.
Sure.
But as we grow, it'll happen, so we have to be a little bit aware of it. yeah, so it's anyone can submit, internal sort of governance for quality control, and that's basically it. We have a Discord. We're always looking. I think we're actively trying to bring teams into the ecosystem. Like I think, the more teams that we have building, the more the ecosystem grows. So I would say if you want to get involved, make a game, but also I would say like get to know the team, like join the Discord, be like, hey, this is what I'm building, this is the team. I think it's still very relational at this point. Like we all know this builders, we like all hang out. And so yeah, join the Discord. Everyone's amped to help. Everyone's very supportive of each other. And yeah, and then I think once the game is mature, we'd be more than happy to throw it on the arcade. And I think it's in our interest to build out kind of like a Steam entry point because ultimately every game on the arcade adds value for every other game.
That's what I felt like when I was logging in. It's like, oh, this kind of feels like Steam. Now, I'm not a developer and I'm not even really a gamer, but I have limited experience with Steam because my kids, wanted me to join in. And I tell you, it felt there's a little bit of friction there trying to understand it. It's pretty, I don't know. There's so much in there almost it's hard to find what you need or pay for things so it's kind of neat with what you got here was type in your username, sign in with wallet, and you're done. There's not a password to go save. There's not a password to go change every 3 months or anything like that. So the security side of it is done through the blockchain. And to me, that's a real big motivating factor for people to keep exploring Web3 gaming, and because it's getting easier. And at some point, it's going to become popular enough because you just take your wallet with you and go sign in, and you're done. It's neat.
When we get a more central digital ID system, right? Like I should be able to take my wallet and sign into Google with it, right? I should be able to take my wallet and sign into Yahoo with it. I should be able to take my wallet and sign to the IRS with it, for that matter, if that's how I choose to authenticate, right? We've seen the dangers of centralized providers having control over your identity.
There you go.
Talk about deplatforming, right? It's bad enough if Steam deplatforms you. What happens if Google deplatforms you?
Yeah. Fair.
You might lose access to way more than just Google services because now you use those Google for your authorization layer for so many other connected services, right? I can't tell you how many things like Spotify. I think I log in with my Google account, right?
Yeah.
Oh, there goes all that, right? So yeah, the sooner we can get a digital identity layer and then, pack other things of data on there. So sure, we've got our game states that we might want to port between different servers or providers, but medical history, right? Every time I go to a different department of whatever, I should just be able to carry that in my data backpack basically and say like, oh, you're requesting these parts of my identity. Here you go, right? I authorize, decrypt that and send it over to you. And then you have access to whatever medical history you're requesting. So I don't have to fill out the same goddamn form in every department and, every level of every hospital I go to in the US. So yeah, I mean, I think digital ID is a killer use case for blockchains. It's not just like, voter fraud resistant. It's not just convenience. It's not just privacy. It's all the above, and it's an empowering thing. It's a fundamentally empowering thing that I think it should be a killer use case for everyone. But I just don't think people know that much about it, right? I'd love it if we had that base digital identity that you could then derive or spin off other aliases to. So we should be able to have your Google Voice number connected basically to this, authorized through this. And then you can just sever one number and spin up another. So if your phone number gets leaked, email addresses, same thing. We should be able to alias those out from a central, identity that you control. And then if your email gets leaked over to some spam thing, you just sever it, make another one, whatever, no big problem, right? Think about the amount of data breaches, the amount of identity theft, the amount of economic damage that happens because we don't have control of our digital identity in this aliasable, extensible way. So yeah, if we could get the core problem solved, then yeah, of course, I'd love to use it for every game I log into. Why not? My Nintendo account shouldn't be going through like a Google account. It should be going through my wallet, basically. It should be going through a private key that I control. And maybe we can have aliased private keys as well. So I could have, less permission to one on my phone versus, where the crypto assets all lie, right? That'd be fine too. And we can do things with ENS that way. So we say like, well, whatever address currently controls the ENS can be, the primary one that's allowed to log in. Then we can shift that around without having necessarily change the ownership of the ENS from the asset address. Anyway, long-winded rant to say there's so much potential for blockchain to empower lives, and I think that doing it on game with game assets, game states, just adding that to your digital identity is one of those very synergistic things with everything else that we're trying to achieve.
I love it. Daniel, I wanted to ask you, you've been with Cartridge for 6 months. Give us what's on the mind of the team in the next 6 months, and then where do you think you're going to be 2 years from now?
What a great question. I would say, thank you for asking. I would say that right now our goals are, I would say, twofold. I think that we've really built up a lot of momentum over the last 6 months. I think that our infrastructure and products are getting better and better. We have teams, more teams joining the ecosystem, building games that are more and more polished. And I think that among, in the on-chain gaming ecosystem, there's obviously a lot of chains, a lot of groups, there's a lot of people working on this. And so, I think Starknet and the Cartridge ecosystem is well positioned to really take and keep the lead on-chain gaming, and really be leaders in game design, game performance, so on and so forth. And so I think we really want to keep momentum up. We want to keep improving the products. I think Controller actively being maintained, the arcade actively being improved. I think that this is pretty bleeding edge technology, as we talked about earlier. Cairo is not a simple language. Starknet is not a simple chain. So really pushing forward on performance and ease of use, and also growing an ecosystem. More teams, more developers, network effects, so on and so forth. I think that's our goal. We have momentum and we don't want to lose it. We want to keep pushing forward. And I think in 2 years, I think ideally, we are like, this is it. This is where serious builders make on-chain games. Starknet has amazing performance for the reasons we touched on earlier. The tooling is good. So I think the ideal is that in 2 years' time, like we're just it. This is the best in class experience, community, infrastructure. And so if you want to make on-chain games, you just do it here. I think that's everyone's dream. Hopefully we can get there.
Daniel, thank you so much for joining today. We're going to move on to the next part of our show. You're welcome to hang out if you want. This is the part of the show where I read Reddit, so you don't have to. These are the best comments from the previous week on our Ethereum. You're always welcome to join the daily general discussion over at our Ethereum. That's where the Doots live. That's where our people are. That's where the EV Mavericks hail from, as well as the Discord
some of the
here.
teams. Like go get the team from Loot Survivor to drop by and say hi, right?
Yeah.
Maybe I definitely will. I'll pop in.
Yeah, we can.
So they can say like, hey, when they have a new release, hey, here's some new features, get some discussion on like the value of on-chain games, the approach that they have to their economic system. Like, let's get some more awareness and get some more discussion on the sort of philosophy that makes them design the way that they do, and help them build their community.
Yeah, we love to hear from teams. Yeah, the daily general discussion is a great place for these people to, talk about their game or whatever, but also just become a community member as well. It's a wonderful place, and happy to be from there. Anything else before we move on?
I mean, this has been awesome. Thank you, JT Logri, for having me. I think this is really cool stuff. I am honored to be able to be here and talk about it.
Awesome. We're sure glad that you could make it. All right. Well, here we go, friends. It's that time to move on to the next part of the show. This is the Daily Doots, Weekly Doots live stream. It's all about showcasing the best of the week from the daily general discussion on our Ethereum. It's a read-along reaction series, and if you want to follow along, head to dailydoots.com, designed and produced by our very own Hanny Abu. Big thanks to Tricky Troll for capturing and curating each day's Doots, and the A-word for curating this most beloved weekly list. Make sure to subscribe to us on all of your favorite platforms by visiting dailydoots.com. We're going to jump right into it. Hanny Abu is off on vacation and soon to be at DevConnect as well. So he has done a mild update to the site, but we do have a rich list starting right now. In number 10, Aiden Cairo at 118, Ethical Trade at 119, Crypto Wow Currency at 129, Hanny Abu at 134, JS Tears also at 134. We have Tricky Troll 164, Benito 2030 at 178, Superfizz at 236, LogrisTheBard climbing up a bit at 246, Harog at the top of the heap at 282. 2. All right, here we go with our weekly roundup. We are going to be doing this via old school by opening up the A-Words comment list here. This is the part where Henny Abu wasn't able to get it done before he had to leave town. Frank the Tank chimes in. Ethereum, $10.9 gives us the measly dollar figure of 31.98 and the A word of that atrocious ratio at 0.032. What is happening? And our haiku, courtesy of JS Tears, hope for one more leg, liquidity powder keg for ETH we could bake. How does he do it, JS Tears? How do you do it every stinking day? Unbelievable. And of course, Clam Chota says, it's Chota time. ETH, take my energy. All right. Now we got the all hail the eternal crab. We're not getting out of that meme for a very long time. Price is just kind of wonky, but it is a proof that we are crabbing sideways, a very long timeline of crabbing. Our shitpost of the week, because we always like to save the best for first. This is from No Scratch 3795. A duder number 2 writes in, ETH is an asset that requires nerves of steel. It rarely goes up, but when it goes down, it reflects the market even better than the market itself. Honestly, the saying, come on, ETH, do something, should rather be, ETH, please do nothing for a while. That's very good. That is it. That is a fact. Please do nothing. That is a fact. Calm down. All right. User Christ Kind. Let's see. Fight some CoinDesk FUD. All right. Christ Kind says, replying to a link to CoinDesk posted in yesterday's daily, posted by Numerous Ruin 4947, a duder number 24. Christ Kind is a duder number 8. Let's see. Solana has never quite eclipsed Ethereum. However, okay. No, it hasn't quite eclipsed Ethereum. Besides lying about performance, developer activity, the list goes on. Actually, Solana hasn't come anywhere near to eclipsing Ethereum. Another comment from the CoinDesk article. While Solana attracted the most new developers of any chain last year. Oh boy, here we go. Well, Christkind replies, I remember a recent post regarding lying about just that. Even going so far as counting Ethereum developers as SQL devs. Another comment from the article, Fusaka will be a major upgrade, but it will still not bring Ethereum and its rollup layers onto the same transactions per second as Solana. Well, here we go again. So still counting everything related to consensus as transactions per second, I guess. The next line, in a world where new GPT seems to come out every other month. Well, what does that have to do with anything? Windows 10 was released in 2015, Windows 11 in 2021. Watch out, Microsoft, you're losing your edge, according to Mr. Gorbunov. Another comment from CoinDesk, new blockchains are increasingly being backed by publicly traded companies such as Arc from Circle and Tempo by Stripe. Both Arc and Tempo are layer 1 L1 blockchains like Ethereum. Instead of building a chain atop Ethereum as an L2 like Coinbase's base, Circle and Stripe decided to build their own settlement layer. Okay, that's actually a bit worrying. Mostly very shallow and uninformed or misleading criticism. Finally, to put it into context, the author's company, Axelar, has a multi-chain approach. Casting doubt on Ethereum might just convince a few builders to use his platform and not build on Ethereum only. Oh, boy, yeah. The shit we have to fight just to get the word out. It's crazy. Oh, here we go. Looks like we got, oh, wait, hold on. Harpo Cryptes, duder number 3, asks about the Polygon ZK EVM, and user Harog delivers the answer. Harpo Cryptes, duder number 3. There's a message in Rabby Wallet that they will stop including Polygon ZK EVM by default. You can still add an RPC manually if needed. And indeed, it seems that chain has close to no activity anymore. Probably a good idea to withdraw if you have funds there. Even if it's still possible later, it can get harder if front ends remove support. Any idea what happened with Polygon ZK EVM? It seemed promising tech at the time. Why didn't it catch on? It launched before blobs, and it was not super cheap initially. Maybe that played a role. Otherwise, technical reasons, just bad BD. Just hard to get a new L2 to critical mass, especially when you already have a token. Harag replies, many years ago, Polygon bought up some of the most promising ZK teams to build their ZK EVM and then to migrate their proof-of-stake chain into a rollup. Unfortunately, their ZK EVM product was way behind their competitors. It was slow, expensive, and not really reliable. They were bleeding money with no way to turn it into a profit in the short term and little chance to do so in the long one. No idea what went wrong internally that this was the result, though. Then a few months ago, it was clear to them that they could never catch up to their competitors, and their approach will also not enable them to migrate the POS chain, proof-of-stake chain, to their own ZK rollup. They let go of the whole ZK EVM team and stopped development of their ZK rollup. I think they asked everyone to move their funds away, but not sure how long they will keep ZK EVM running. The ZK EVM team around Jordi Bailina then created a new startup called Zisk, Z-I-S-K, which focuses on a ZK VM for real-time proving mainnet. Looking on ethproofs.org, it seems the Zisk team has quite a good product, not the fastest or cheapest ones, but pretty good on both fronts. We will see how they develop in the coming months, and he cites some sources. Thank you, Harag, for being the teacher that you are. All right, LogrisTheBard. LogrisTheBard's got a big post here. I always think it's a big post. It's always big to me anyway. I always feel like, always got some kind of banger going on. Yeah.
If Vitalik took time off, we would lose a great researcher. A great mind. And he's not just writing about Ethereum, he's writing about
this is a big one.
Illusion systems.
It's a big one.
Crypto economics. That would be a tremendous loss to the world, but the Ethereum machine would just keep chugging.
LogrisTheBard from tokenomicsexplained.com.
Just keep chugging. Just keep chugging. Just keep chugging. Just keep chugging.
Had a few quality conversations. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
When you're done on this one, I'll nag Krono to see if he wants to make a cartridge stable coin and, see if we can kick back to the various game development companies that are promoting cartridge. So stay on the line.
Stay on the line. And then you guys spitball and I'll use a bathroom. See, it's a win-win-win. Had a few quality conversations in the last day, a repeating theme and the topic of debate on stage was what our industry was going to do about treasury yield. Let's say that yields over the next 30 or so years average 3%. Of course, the U.S. would like it lower, but then there's numbers of factors driving it higher, such as lower credit rating of U.S. bonds, a looming national debt of $30 trillion or so. Good. Woo. If Secretary Bennett and the Federal Reserve are correct in their forecast, we'll be at something like $3 trillion in stablecoins by 2030. Wow. If Tether Circle get to keep that money, that means they have about $90 billion in revenue annually from the interest stablecoin holders forfeit on their own money. This is how you get valuations for the Tether company at $500 billion, even though the company does basically very little and only has about 150 employees. This is, to put it mildly, more revenue than all of DeFi put together. People are raging about Hyperliquid generating $1 billion in revenue. The Curve DEX generates something like $25 million a year. At $90 billion, what happens to this revenue is the biggest question of the next cycle, and it will make or break DeFi. The state of play at the moment is that the Genius Act has language in it that prevents stablecoin yield from going to stablecoin holders. This wasn't even argued into the bill by Tether, though they are the largest beneficiary. It was actually the primary condition of the bank lobbyists. But But if the goal of the regulations are to protect people, it's difficult to make any case in which forcing people out of the interest on their own money is protecting them. Either way, their money is being subjected to risks by whatever revenue source backs the stablecoin. I haven't a compelling answer to what is the incremental risk of paying a portion of that interest forward to retail. The argument put forth by the banks is the flight of capital from banks that would threaten the lending facilities in the U.S., which is not a consumer protectionist argument. The loophole at the moment used by Coinbase and others is that the dividends aren't being paid to retail, but rather the revenue goes to the issuer, Circle, which then pays the distributor, Coinbase, a fee, which in turn puts that money into a marketing budget and pays out to a reward system, Coinbase Earn. Through this channel, end users still receive the interest on their payments. Naturally, the banks are trying to close this loophole with the pending market structure bill. On the debate, there was consensus amongst the 4 presenters that paying devs this money and investing it into the ecosystem was both legal and healthy. But as long as that remains the argument, it seems like it's a hard loophole to close. Let's assume for the moment that this loophole is protected by Circle lobbyists. How can DeFi turn around and strip this revenue from the Circle company and give it to DeFi users? Step 1 of this is to do what Hyperliquid already did. You have a stablecoin issuer like Native form an agreement to create a whitelisted stablecoin like USDH. The pattern for that already worked, and this already shifts the revenue from going 100% to the issuer to something like 95 to 99% to the distributor. Each ecosystem, each L2 or each app, creates a stablecoin in this way, or maybe major players like Frax fills the role. For step 2, the distributor forwards the revenue to either the app or to the underlying pools of the app. This gives those pools using the ecosystem stablecoin a several percent higher yield. For step 3, you need a mechanism to vampire attack the existing pools to convert TVL to the ecosystem stablecoin. You don't have to convert every single app at the same time, but as a market maker or lender, you can't afford to be in a tiny pool. Basically, arbitrage eats the first mover alive. So somehow we need to incentivize this risk. There are 2 things I think we should try here concurrently. First, a player like Frax or other large holders of LDRs could just direct an outsized portion of their bribe power to one ecosystem at a time and jack that APR up to the hundreds of percent for pools using the ecosystem stablecoin. Second, you can execute the sushi swap playbook. You get LPs of the old pool to deposit a vampire contract that the LP deposit tokens sit in until a critical threshold of TVL is met, after which it all migrates at the same time. This removes the risk of the first mover entirely, but there's a fledgling phase here where you're probably paying people in the vampire pool extra yield, even though only USDC and USDT is being used there. You really don't want that to last long, but it's a viable trick to break the Moloch trap. The missing pieces here are who is going to fund this pool before the vampire attack executes, and how do you convert, say, $1 billion of ETH USDC into ETH Frax or something atomically. At the end of this, you have a variety of stablecoins. There's probably one for each major exchange. Think BUSD reborn, and then one for each coordinating ecosystem, such as ARBUSD, CurveUSD, FraxUSD, etc. If executed correctly, the value of Tether goes from 500 billion to like 50 billion, and the market cap of DeFi absorbs a good portion of that. And end users of DeFi actually get a fairer interest rate. $90 billion a year. Heck, we need to get organizing. And that is LogrisTheBard from tokenomicsexplained.com. Well said.
I really can't think of a higher magnitude thing we got to figure out. But I did see that Danny Ryan just made an A plus token, which is a stable coin.
I was just getting ready to ask you if you saw that, because somebody posted this in the daily. They posted they posted something in the daily about this. Can you put a link in the Doots podcast chat, and then I'll open it up if you have it. Treebeard says the Steam back to the conversation. The Steam UI is cancer. It's like 15 years of technical debt layered on top of each other. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm in the dark.
But yeah, I can see a situation here where we could take the stablecoin yield, go through an issuer, through a distributor, to an application, and just start creating bribes into an aerodrome pool or something for all the liquidity that's sitting there, right? And just carry that like 3% yield forward to the end user. And every middleman along the way, like if you pay the aerodrome DAO the proceeds, and the aerodrome DAO votes on what percentage that they keep, and then they vote on the percentage they're going to distribute, which pools it goes into, right? We can just basically have this waterfall where all the treasury yield flows downstream through the distributor, through the application, into the individual pools the end holders would participate in, right? And I think that would, given the choice of holding USDT at, I don't know, 6%, or holding the ecosystem stablecoin for Aerodrome, Aero USD or something like that, at 3% more yield, of course you'd get a lot of people doing that, right? They're backed by the same things. They're backed by treasuries at the end of the day, right? So I just want to attack Tether's market cap and systemically dismantle them and leave all that yield in the hands of the people that are generating the demand for those stablecoins at the end of the day. So the Tether is actually generating the demand for all of the inter-exchange volume, right? And so why, like, you look at this from Binance's perspective in a more centralized way, why does Binance want to be creating all the demand for all of Tether's yield? Wouldn't Binance rather that the liquidity pools be using a Binance stablecoin that pays them the yield?
Right.
And so there's just a lot of chances to kind of affect here. Now, I know that Binance previously had a stablecoin and it got shut down, but that was before there was Genia and Mica, and they're in trouble with U.S. government for a bunch of other things. And so I think with the current regulatory clarity that we've gotten, and with the change of the lawfare state that we were in to what's now, they just pardoned CZ, you could say it's more favorable.
Yeah.
So they could go and revisit that topic and, take out $50 or $100 billion of Tether that they're generating the demand for, sexes generally, and replace that with ecosystem stablecoins, keep that yield in-house, and use it to promote their own growth. If they can do it, I think DeFi can do it, and we can do it better.
Well said. I want to find I got to find this link here. Oh, hang on, friends. Hang on. Let's see.
All I have is a tweet, but I'll put it in the in the discussion.
Yeah, do that up in the Dudes podcast chat. We'll get the tweet up. Thank you. Okay. Big D, Danny. Here we go. Stable coins are now law in the U.S. We need to use this opportunity to build a more distributed and resilient systems rather than double down on entirely centralized constructions. Welcome to the new @A+ game. Oh, good. I'm going to give that a follow. First 1,000 people. Here we go. Oh, yeah. Nice.
Can you scroll down a bit? Look at Nixo's tweet.
All right. Okay. For those of you that are listening on the podcast, if you're listening, so this is a Trojan horse picture where the fort that the Trojan horse is parked outside the castle. The castle is the banks. The Trojan horse is USDA Plus, which is this new stablecoin idea. And then in the belly of the Trojan horse is Ethereum. Okay, and then we scroll down to Nixo. So then their Trojan horse meme is the global financial system is the castle, stable coins is the Trojan horse, and in the belly of the Trojan horse is self-sovereignty, resilience, anti-fragility, global access, verifiability, and trustlessness. So it's all the values. I love it.
And the boomers are pulling it into the global financial system.
The boomers are pulling it in.
But she was 5 months earlier.
Wow.
July 14th.
Yeah, July 14th. Great job, Nixo. Yeah, she's on point, man. Undeniable talent with that lady, for sure. She's got it. She's got it all dialed in upstairs. Good for her. All right, here we go. Moving on down the list. Benito 2030 weighs in on the market and reminds us that long-term thinking will pay off. Benito 2030, one of our top 10 duders at 178. The current situation in market is so strange. People don't want it to be over because of reasons, obviously. Everything we've learned in the past years is contradicting. All right. 4 years versus the QT ends, rate cuts, 2x all-time high for Bitcoin only, and a lot of alts not even hitting all-time highs versus 3 to 10x all-time highs from last cycles. Blow off tops versus no blow off, all that euphoria, all of it. People are looking for answers and hints. I do as well, and it's impossible to get good ones. Either it's cope and you just believe what confirms your bias, or you think about capitulation, but you're scared of missing that one last leg of the cycle. Bad news, I don't think I can help you either, at least not for the short term. I think the 4-year cycle is dead, but again, maybe I'm just coping. But on the long run, things look great. L1 scaling continues. High fees will come back from time to time. But generally speaking, L1 is viable for way more people in portfolios than expected. And the L2s are scaling, like really scaling. And I'm not talking about the transactions per second numbers from Lighter. Those are great as well. I'm more referring to ZK Sync, Mega ETH, to a certain extent base. Let's see if they can ZK their chain. And think what we are seeing is more than what we need in terms of infrastructure today. This obviously includes the fork in December. I think we basically only need interoperability. The more I think about it, the more it's clear to me that composability plus security on a world ledger is everything we need. If people could do stuff in the ETH ecosystem without waiting and even knowledge of L2s, because for them it's one transaction and it's confirmed within seconds, then there's really nothing that can stop Ethereum. Long term, the research and the hard work will pay off. Yeah, this is so true.
I've been saying that a while.
I've been thinking about this. Like we've had hundreds of improvements over time. If you go through all of the different things the L2s have done.
Oh yeah, we've
I'm
cut
preaching to the
issuance
choir.
by 90-something%. We've cut energy. We've got a green narrative. We've increased the TPS. We
it's
have
like-
an L2 narrative. We've had stablecoin adoption. We've had tokenized commodities. We've had tokenized equities. We've seen the adoption of institutions. We've got the buy-in from Chase and all the celebrities, JP Diamond, Larry Fink, etc. We've got, just everything on the fundamentals. Like we've got Robinhood, we've got like 5x growth from Ondo and various protocols. We've got credit cards now. We've got all the IBAN adoption. We've got MiCA compliance. We've got the Genius bill. We got the stable, we've got the market structure bill pending. There's just like a million things have gone right.
And what does the price do? The price does this.
We've got the macro environment. We've got rate cuts that are happening now. We've got quantitative tightening is ending. We're going into quantitative easing. We've got like everything is pointing up, and the price is just down like almost 50%. And you're just like, WTF? It is so weird to live through.
I know.
What feels like just a. What can you do? You just put your hands up and you're just like, okay, well, I don't know. We had someone put a sticker on a skateboard once upon a time, the price would go 20%, right?
Oh my
you have
God.
a picture outside someone's office, like a Google office, and then like the token price would yeet up 100%.
It's all gone.
And now you're seeing like visible signs of adoption. You're seeing like the Biddle fund, like hundreds of billions of dollars. You're seeing you're just seeing adoption left, right, and center. You're seeing bank after bank launching pilot programs and
It's nuts.
come together into consortiums in order to adopt this. You see every TradFi financial firm has to have a answer for what their stablecoin strategy is, or what their blockchain strategy is at this point. It's just a standard part of every yearly deck that they're all required to put together, right? For the board of directors, they have to have an answer for what they're like. What's their response to AI? They have to answer for what is their response to stablecoins on chain. And yet, crab battle, right?
I will say one of the most bullish things happened to me today, because I told my wife, I'm like, I don't know what's going on, because I had every intention of maybe trying to buy a house over the next year, right? Take a little off table this year, take a little off next year, and finally get something. Nothing fancy, just someplace different. Just because we've never moved. We've been in the same place forever. And and I was kind of lamenting about it. She's like, why? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, it's all puzzling to me, but I think the whales be doing whale things. And then later on from work, she texted me. She's like, we're not selling until it's over $5,000. I'm like, you go, girl. Like, wow. Okay. Now we got a target. Now she's establishing a target. She's getting bullish.
You had stronger hands than me. I definitely let go of some this cycle.
I would too. Yeah.
I sold about 30% in the 4,000 to 5,000 range.
There you go, boy. Nice.
And I will happily buy it back in the 1,000 range.
Yeah. You may get your wish.
That's not a wish. I would also happily not buy it back and let it go to 10,000. That's
fair too.
I'm just playing a game, minimizing regret at this point.
Yeah.
So I have lived through every positive catalyst, every positive narrative, right? I've lived through DATS acquiring like 4% of the Ethereum supply, right? Just that completely new buyer source. I've lived through ARK Invest now buying Ethereum. I've lived through, like the international, not pension funds. What's it? But the basically the wealth funds, right? I've lived through them buying, Ethereum, however indirectly, whether it's an ETF or whether it's a DAT, right? It is so, the supply overhang on ETH must be in the tens of millions of ETH of people that are just willing to exit at low prices at this point. To suppress the amount of inflows that we've seen.
Yeah.
You look at all the large wallets accumulation that's happened. You look at within the next year, we should get large index funds like the Rust 1000 that are looking to include Ethereum DATs like Bitminer, right? So, it's not impossible for MicroStrategy to be in the S&P 500. It's not impossible for Bitmine to be in the S&P 500. Bitmine has more revenue because Ethereum makes revenue and Bitcoin doesn't, right? So these things are based on trading volume, liquidity depth, revenue, and market cap. And we would meet that as a requirement. So you start getting systemic buys of everyone holding an S&P 500 ETF or a tech stock ETF or Russell 1000 ETF. That just are buying Ethereum because they're supporting the NAV of these DAT companies, and it's in their rules they have to. It's just, what more do you need? Like, how many tens of millions of ETH need to overturn hands into new buyers before we can go up? Because it's obviously a lot more than I gave it credit for.
Yeah,
I thought by 10 million we'd be off the races, but we're well past that.
Yeah,
and we're down.
Yeah,
so it's weird.
Part of me is like, oh, careful what you wish for when the big boys come to play, because they don't want it at that price. They want it at this other price. And yeah, some of them bought there. And then I don't know how many like OG retail mom and pops are interested in selling now, but apparently some must be. So whatever.
I've just seen, like, on crypto Twitter and privately, I've seen a lot of Ethereum OGs. People have been holding since 2015, 2017, et cetera, at like, $10 ETH prices, that are just saying, yeah, that's enough. And they're selling thousands and thousands and thousands of this. But as I said, if you look at net, histogram of the largest wallets, there's signs of accumulation, not distribution.
Well,
look at Ethereum exchange reserves, it's all straight down. Look at count of wallets with over like 10,000 ETH, it's basically up only. You look at new large buyers, holders. Look at the number of wallets that have acquired versus or sold all of the BM&R stock, right? It's like they've acquired hundreds of new wallets and like literally one went down.
I get all that. And I understand there's OGs that are selling, but why is it 15% in a day? And then it's another 15% in a day. That does not feel like OG simply selling.
Yeah, that's not OG selling. That's why we didn't go above 5,000, right? That's why we didn't rise up to.
That makes more sense.
With the ratio where Bitcoin is, right?
They were like, if we could just get back to the previous.
Bitcoin got up to 100,000 and we just kind of like stayed around 4, right? Yeah. Why did we not go up when Bitcoin did that 50% rise? It's basically these
People wanted
OGs
off.
capitulating. And then that capitulation lasted through like the April zone where people were just like, as we dropped to 1500, they're like, well, I give up, right? They threw up their hands and said, well, I guess the L2 strategy didn't work, or they needed more value capture. All those narratives that seem to only apply to ETH, but don't apply to XRP for some reason, don't apply to Hedera, HBAR, Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It's these justifications why the price isn't going up, and they just they capitulated. And then into the DAT narrative going into 4K, a bunch of more hands said, well, I'm taking this second shot, I'm out, right? And so I know several people, including me on the second shot there, that's like, okay, I'm taking some off the table. I've seen enough.
I'm wondering how quickly the ship rights itself, because I don't see a multi-year bear market. I just don't.
I don't know. I mean, the 4-year cycle is a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So you could see a 1 year, find the bottom in the next year, and then we could go up over the next 3 years. I just wasn't willing to round trip as much of my net worth as I had in ETH on, through another 4 years just to kind of maybe break even in the next 4 years. Like I've got enough. I want to get to a point where I can start earning yield on other things and not be so over concentrated on ETH. And plenty of stablecoin yield out there. I mean, there's stablecoin yields in the 10 to 15%. So everything that I extract from ETH that was making 2 or 3 or 4% can now make 10%, 15% in DeFi pools. So, the revenue is going up and I'm not riding the wave down. Seems like it was worth doing.
There you go. All right. Thank you for the color there, Logri. We're going to move on. I got food in the oven. Crypto Wow Currency Deuter 129. The headline explains why flash loans will be unaffected by slot time changes. Technically speaking, flash loans do not have a duration. They're instantaneous and atomic. This is because the entire loan is originated and repaid within a single Ethereum transaction, which itself executed atomically. Another way to think about it is that the rest of the Ethereum network pauses for an instant while the flash loan is resolved, just like the network state pauses during the execution of any other type of standard transaction. Although there are plenty of tricks that clients can use to multi-thread things, the Ethereum virtual computer itself is single-threaded, so slot times can go up, down, or sideways, and flash loans are entirely unaffected. All right, good to know. Here we go. Grow the Pie offers a weekly roundup of the Ethereum ecosystem stats and just leveled up their chain pages. Grow the Pie is a Deuter 66 for this week, a weekly summary, the Ethereum ecosystem insights from Grow the Pie from November 3rd through the 10th. Last week, the Ethereum ecosystem showcased robust scaling advancements with transactions per second reaching new records and layer 2 solutions driving efficiency. Below is a concise summary of key developments and metrics from our platform. All right, here we go. Transactions per second record, an all-time high of 24,192 per second, primarily driven by Layer 2 Lighter with its ZK rollup architecture and state differentials, which minimize data posting to Ethereum blobs. Base chain transaction milestone. They hit a daily all-time high of 15.43 million transactions, reflecting strong user engagement and low fees, fostering organic activity. Layer 2 weekly active addresses declined approximately 68% from all-time highs to 5.37 million single-chain users, with 288,000 cross-layer 1 and layer 2 and 218,000 multi-layer 2 users. Ethereum mainnet held steady at 2.28 million, underscoring its reliability. All right, stablecoin adoption metrics. Base stablecoin supply surpassed 4.5 billion, highlighting growing liquidity and DeFi integration on the chain. Inc. stablecoin growth reached an all-time high of 134.9 million, up 14% in 24 hours and 127% in 30 days, signaling rapid adoption. Celo daily active addresses led all chains with over 709,000 daily active addresses and 1.4 million transactions. There's some other tokenization and community updates here. Looks like, spoiler, a big update coming on Grow the Pie. They'll go live on the site later tonight. Chain pages will be worth watching. So there's the big update. We've just leveled up our chain pages. Search by chain name, whether it's Ethereum or Layer 2, and your feature list, highlights for recent all-time highs and milestones, interactive apps map, real-time metrics, achievements, streaks, and all-time, and more. There it is. At growthepie.com, they got the new chain pages rolling out. You can see it right there. Excellent. If you guys are into data, they just have some of the prettiest web page work here. Check it out, growthepie.com. A duder number, what did I say? 66 for this week, and a longtime supporter of our Ethereum's daily general discussion. I'm so glad that they stopped by with that information. User substantial hurry tracks more continued adoption. A duder number 2 for the week. Zooming out, adoption continues. Policy advisor at the Bank of England here in the UK just shared this with me. Ooh, shared this with you. You know this person. Maybe they should come on the podcast. Proposed regulatory regime for sterling-denominated systemic stablecoins. Sterling-denominated systemic stablecoins. Let's open up this link. USD stablecoins will remain the most liquid, but FX risk means lending and borrowing against GBP-denominated assets will be unlocked. Proposed regulatory regime for sterling-denominated systemic stablecoins. Link here. Do I read this and forward a little bit? The Bank of England's core mission is to promote, I wish I had an accent I could do, the good people of the UK by maintaining monetary and financial stability. Trust in money is a critical part of that mission and has never been more relevant than now, as innovation in money and payments accelerates, including through the growth of stablecoins. It is our job to ensure that the public can have the same trust in new forms of money as they do in existing ones. Is it your job? Is it your job, Bank of England? I don't know. All right, second paragraph. With that comes great opportunities for the people or for the Bank of England. Anyway, I'm trolling. We are designing a regime for stablecoins that is fit for the future. Our focus is on possible future use in real-world payments and settlements. Okay, not their current use to buy and sell crypto assets. Use of regulated stablecoins could lead to faster, cheaper retail wholesale payments with greater functionality both at home and across borders. We want to support such a role for stablecoins as part of a multi-money system alongside commercial bank money, including tokenized bank deposits, all underpinned by the continued role of central bank money at the heart of the financial system. Central bank. It goes on from there. I'll let you read it. You can find that link at dailydoots.com. Awesome. Thank you so much, Substantial Hurry 25, duder number 2. From your friend who's a policy advisor at the Bank of England. That's all right. Insurance guy question, duder number 28 goes over the increasing regulatory clarity in the U.S. Here we go. Duder number 28. Looks like something insane just happened for staking in the U.S. Quote, Treasury and IRS release revenue procedure. Here we go. The new guidance clarifies how staking rewards are treated for crypto trusts and ETPs. Under this framework, staking rewards are no longer treated as immediate taxable income for trusts, allowing crypto ETPs to stake assets and distribute rewards to investors without prior tax complications. I love this. Awesome. Key points. Here's the scope. It applies to staking within registered crypto ETPs. The impact enables funds to stake holdings and pass yields directly to investors under existing tax advantage structures. The market effect. It removes a major regulatory obstacle that previously limited staking adoption in U.S. investment products. This is under Secretary Scott Bessent's account. This is great. This essentially opens up the floodgates for all ETFs to soon stake their stash and become yield bearing. Note, this only affects institutional companies and not individuals like us. Awesome. Well, my accountant interprets it the same as I do, which is I'll sell it and I'll pay taxes when I sell it, not when I earn it. All right. Allegedly. Moving down the list, got 2 more left, everybody. 12 Meatballs checking in from Buenos Aires. Hello again from Buenos Aires. I spent last week working furiously, and I'm almost done, hoping to release a version on Friday. Meanwhile, I'm looking at my calendar, and I might have overcommitted to it a little bit. On Friday, I'm going to the Polkadot event for the keynote, and then out for drinks at a security finance event that will probably involve me hiding in a corner and watching people. Polkadot? Really? I'm super excited about Governance Day. This is a sentence I never expected to come out of my mouth. And the Cypherpunk Congress. Then comes ETH Day, a full day celebration for the event. That night is Builders Night with fireside chats and panels, but they overlap, so I might have messed up. The following day is DPIN Day, that's DEPIN, which I signed up for because I keep seeing Logri talking about it. Now that the time comes to understanding decentralized physical infrastructure networks, DPIN, I'm wondering what I was thinking. That evening is a food event that looks super fun, but now has gone very corporate, and you have to be either a VIP to be allowed in for the first 2 hours. There's a different finance evening that evening that I might go to instead. I have a day of interviews and then the Pudgy Penguin Sala, which I have no idea about. Finally, the Ethereum privacy stack looks really interesting with some great speakers. Somewhere in there, I hope to get another ice cream with the payment solutions crowd. I feel breathless just writing that out. What's interesting is talking to other people, and it's almost like they are going to a totally different event. Literally zero overlap with my schedule and attending events that I haven't even heard of. There's so much going on here. I'll try to update each day. Also, I'm excited to say that the EV Mavericks have funded me to write 4 articles about that event. 3 deep dives and 1 interview. I have no idea how I would write an overview. These things will come out in the weeks following the event. And that is from one of our fellow EV Mavericks, 12 Meatballs, hailing from Buenos Aires.
Yep.
Nice.
Welcome to a conference. That is pretty much your like ETH Denver, same way, ETH Dev, same way, Dev Connect, same way. Right? You have all these sort of specialist tracks because the blockchain chain can do so many things. So you just have to kind of like, where do you want to vibe at, right?
Yeah, and I'm gonna be super, what's the word, egotistical when I say it. I hope some people are like, I have to go to this event and then I have to go to that event and then I need to know where JT is doing barbecue. That's the ETH Denver thread right there. So if anybody's in ETH Denver and you're getting this message, reach out to me and I'll try to see if I can get you into whatever Airbnb I'm cooking at this year. Still looking for sponsors. I got one, but if you got any others out there that are anybody interested in having me swing by and provide barbecue, I would love to do it. All right. Very good. Last one. Is this it? User ETH10K is FUD, shares Vitalik's et al.'s Trustless Manifesto. In case you missed it, the Trustless Manifesto is out. It's truly a great read. It's got its own smart contract where you can sign a pledge after reading. Some things are worth fighting for. All right, the Trustless Manifesto. It's pretty long. Let's just get to let's do why we build on Ethereum. We build on Ethereum because we choose verification over blind trust. We write code so that power cannot hide behind policy. We design protocols so that freedom does not depend on permission. Ethereum was not created to make finance efficient or apps convenient. It was created to set people free, to empower anyone, anywhere, to coordinate without permission and without trusting anyone they cannot hold accountable. Ethereum is the path to trustlessness. That promise must not be lost as we scale. This is what trustlessness demands. Trustlessness is expensive. It requires redundancy, openness, and complexity. It requires mempools that anyone can use, even if that invites spam. It requires clients that anyone can run, even if few will. It requires governance that moves slowly because no one can override consensus. Every shortcut that assumes trust eventually costs freedom. Trustlessness depends on free open source software, not only code that can be read, but code that can be freely run, verified, and improved. Trustless design must therefore obey 3 laws: no critical secrets, no indispensable intermediaries, and no unverifiable outcomes. Okay, the limits. Let's go. The duty of builders. We who design protocols are stewards, not gatekeepers. Our duty is not to build what is easiest, but what remains open and self-sovereign. When complexity tempts us to centralize, we must remember every line of convenience code can become a choke point. When critics ask why our designs are complicated, we should ask them what or whom they are trusting instead. If simplicity comes from trust, it is not simplicity, it is surrender. Trustlessness costs computation, latency, and mental effort. It buys resilience, longevity, neutrality, and freedom. Trustlessness also requires viable incentives. Systems must reward those who sustain them without turning them into gatekeepers. A protocol that relies on unpaid altruism will decay. A protocol that rewards control will centralize. The only stable equilibrium is one where neutrality is profitable. The way forward. Ethereum has scaled. Now it must stay honest. As we build new layers, new accounts, and new ways to interact, we must preserve the properties that made Ethereum matter. Users initiate their own actions. Anyone can verify and participate. No one can be silently excluded. Logic lives in code, not in contracts of trust. Inclusion depends on incentives, not on reputation or permission. Trustlessness is not perfection. It is a system that fails publicly, transparently, and recoverably, rather than privately and silently. Here's the pledge. We choose to build trustless systems even when it is harder. We pay the cost of openness over the convenience of control. We do not outsource neutrality to anyone who can be bribed, coerced, or shut down. We measure success not by transactions per second, but by trust reduced per transaction. We refuse to build on infrastructure we could not replace. We refuse to call a system, air quote, permissionless when only the privileged can participate. We refuse to trade autonomy for Polish or polite or freedom or frictionless UX. Trustlessness is not preserved by consensus alone. It is preserved by resistance. If your protocol requires faith in an intermediary, change it. If it relies on a private gateway, replace it. If it hides critical state or logic off-chain, expose it. In the end, the world does not need more efficient middlemen. It needs fewer reasons to trust them. Trustlessness is the foundation. Everything else is construction on top of it. The designs will change. The principles will not. Sign the Trustless Manifesto today. You can do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I think I'll do it right now. Give me a second. I got to log in. Okay, sign the Trustless Manifesto pledge. Open up Zerabi. I'm going to connect. Here we go. Go for it. Signing on Rabby. My jtnickel.eth account. We're doing it live. You know what? I can just... There it is on the Lattice One. Not a sponsor. Hardware wallet out there in my book. Done. All right. I think that's it. Well, thanks so much for sticking around today. Thanks again to Chrono and giving us a overview of cartridge.gg. Let's open up that website one more time. Cartridge.gg. Jump in, develop, make stuff. The world needs you to build, and they need you to build on Ethereum and Starkware and any other layer 2. All right, that's it. Thanks for subbing, smashing the bells around here. Give us a like and stick around after the live stream. Also, if you guys want to have a guest on here, just reach out to me. You can find me on the old X at ProDJKC. I'm JT Nickel on Reddit. Anyway, that's all we got from today. Make sure to give us a follow at dailydoots.com. On behalf of the Ethereum Daily General Discussion and the EV Maverick Style, my name is JT. Cheers, big hugs from Kansas City.